The night Dominic Vale's conscience awakened was the night he was supposed to destroy an innocent woman. He'd signed the contract without hesitation. A marriage to secure his empire, nothing more. He expected a cunning socialite who understood the game. Instead, when the bedroom door closed and he saw the raw terror in Serafina's eyes, something inside him fractured. She wasn't a player in this world. She was a sacrifice. And for the first time in his brutal life, the most powerful man in the underworld made a choice that had nothing to do with power. Want to know what happens when mercy collides with the Mafia? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Venetian marble gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Dominic Vale's fountain pen scratched across parchment. Each stroke was precise, deliberate, the signature of a man who'd built an empire on calculated decisions and ruthless execution. Around the mahogany table sat representatives from New York's oldest families, men whose surnames carried weight in boardrooms and back alleys alike. "The merger is complete," announced Vincent Castellano, patriarch of the family whose bloodline stretched back to Sicily's golden age. His weathered hand smoothed the contract as if blessing it. "Your union with my niece will stabilize the Eastern Territories. No more bloodshed over shipping routes. No more uncertainty." Dominic leaned back in his leather chair, the movement controlled and elegant despite his imposing frame. At 34, he'd transformed his father's struggling operation into something unprecedented, a network that moved through legitimate business like shadows through fog. Banks, construction, import-export firms. The violence was there always, but buried beneath layers of corporate respectability. "When do I meet her?" His voice carried the faint rasp of Sicilian vowels, though he'd been born in Brooklyn. "Tomorrow night. The engagement dinner." Vincent's smile didn't reach his eyes. Serafina has been prepared for this role. She understands what's expected. Prepared. Dominic recognized the euphemism. In their world, women were groomed from birth to navigate the dangerous waters of arranged alliances. They learned to smile while counting exits, to charm while calculating threats. He expected nothing less from his future wife, a woman hardened enough to stand beside him without flinching. "I trust she's been informed of the terms," Dominic said, reaching for his whiskey. "Every detail." Vincent's tone carried satisfaction. "She knows this isn't a love match. It's business. She'll provide heirs, maintain appearances, and secure her family's position. Nothing more is required." Nothing more. The words should have brought relief. Dominic had watched too many men in his position get tangled in messy emotions, making catastrophic decisions because of a beautiful face or wounded pride. He wouldn't make that mistake. This marriage would be another acquisition, clean, profitable, devoid of complication. The meeting concluded with handshakes and expensive cognac. As Dominic's driver navigated Manhattan's gleaming streets toward his penthouse, he reviewed the dossier his security chief had compiled. Serafina Castellano, 23, educated at private academies in Switzerland and Paris. The photograph showed a striking woman with dark hair and refined features, always photographed at charity events or family gatherings, always perfectly composed. Perfect, he thought, a porcelain doll who knows her role. The engagement dinner arrived with the precision of a military operation. Dominic's penthouse had been transformed. Imported roses in crystal vases, a string quartet tucked discreetly in the corner, catering from the city's most exclusive restaurant. Every detail screamed wealth and power, which was precisely the point. "Mr. Vale!" Vincent arrived first, his wife Gabriella on his arm, followed by a handful of family members whose presence validated the union's importance. "Vincent, welcome." Dominic shook hands, noting the tension in the older man's grip. Nervous? That was unusual for someone who'd survived 4 decades in this business. "Serafina will arrive shortly," Gabriella said, her smile tight. She wanted to ensure everything was perfect. The phrasing struck Dominic as odd, but he dismissed it. Women in their circles obsessed over appearances. It was part of their armor. When she finally entered, the room fell into that peculiar silence that accompanies significant moments. Dominic turned from his conversation with a deputy mayor, whiskey glass halfway to his lips, and felt something unexpected: confusion. The woman who stood in his doorway bore little resemblance to the confident socialite in the photographs. Yes, the physical beauty was there, perhaps even more striking in person, with porcelain skin that seemed to glow against her midnight blue gown. But everything else was wrong. She didn't sweep into the room with practiced grace. She moved like someone walking to an execution, each step measured and uncertain. Her hands, which should have been relaxed at her sides or elegantly holding a clutch, were clasped together so tightly that her knuckles had gone white, and her eyes, dark and luminous, held an expression Dominic recognized from 1,000 business negotiations, pure, undiluted fear. "Serafina, darling." Gabriella rushed to her side, a protective gesture that seemed more jailer than aunt. "Come meet your fiancé." The young woman was guided forward like a child being presented to strangers. When she finally stood before Dominic, he noticed she wouldn't meet his gaze. Instead, she stared at a point somewhere near his chest, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Miss Castellano?" He extended his hand, keeping his voice gentle despite his growing unease. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Her hand trembled when she placed it in his. The touch lasted barely a second before she withdrew, clutching her evening bag as if it were a shield. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Vale." Her voice was barely above a whisper, each word carefully formed, rehearsed. "What the hell is this?" Throughout dinner, Dominic observed her with the same analytical precision he applied to business rivals. She sat to his right at the head of the table, pushing food around her plate but eating almost nothing. When addressed directly, she responded with single sentences, always polite, always appropriate, always terrified. "Your home is beautiful," she murmured when Gabriella prompted her to compliment the penthouse. "Thank you." Dominic watched her carefully. "I hope you'll be comfortable here after the wedding." Her fork clattered against china. "Of course, thank you." Vincent, seated across from them, drank heavily and talked loudly about business prospects, clearly trying to fill the awkward silence his niece created. But even his practiced bonhomie couldn't mask the wrongness permeating the evening. When the guests moved to the living room for after-dinner drinks, Dominic caught Vincent's elbow. "A word." They stepped into Dominic's study, all dark wood and leather, the scent of expensive cigars lingering in the air. "What aren't you telling me?" Dominic closed the door, his patience exhausted. Vincent's jovial mask slipped. "I don't know what you mean." "Your niece is terrified. The woman in these photos—" He gestured to the dossier on his desk. "She's poised, confident. The woman in my living room looks like she's about to shatter. She's nervous." Vincent poured himself whiskey without asking. "It's a big change. She'll adjust." "Nervous women don't shake like that. Nervous women don't look at their future husband like he's the executioner." Dominic's voice dropped. Dangerous. "If there's something I need to know—" "There's nothing." Vincent's tone turned sharp. "The contract is signed. The merger is happening. Serafina will fulfill her duties. That's all that matters." Duties. The word hung in the air like a threat. "I want to speak with her, alone." "That's not—" It wasn't a request. Vincent's face reddened, but he knew better than to argue with Dominic Vale when that particular edge entered his voice. "Fine, but nothing inappropriate. The wedding is in 3 days." When Vincent left, Dominic stood at his window, overlooking Central Park, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. In his world, arranged marriages were common, expected even. But they were negotiations between willing parties who understood the rules. The women were sophisticated players who traded their family connections and social grace for security and status. They might not love their husbands, but they weren't victims. Serafina Castellano was something else entirely. "Mr. Vale?" Her voice came from the doorway, so soft he almost missed it. He turned to find her standing there, still clutching that evening bag, her aunt nowhere in sight. Up close, without the buffer of other guests, her fear was even more palpable. But there was something else too, a desperate kind of resignation that made his chest tighten uncomfortably. "Please, sit." He gestured to one of the chairs facing his desk, deliberately choosing not to sit behind it. Dominance displays wouldn't help here. She perched on the edge of the leather seat, spine straight, hands folded. Every inch of her posture screamed finishing school training, but underneath was something raw and wounded. "I wanted to apologize," she said before he could speak, "for my behavior this evening. I know I should have been better." "Better how?" Her eyes finally lifted to his face, and he saw they were a remarkable shade of amber, like whiskey held up to sunlight. "More engaging, more suitable. I know what you expected, and I'm sorry I'm not—" Her voice broke slightly. "I'm sorry." Dominic leaned back, studying her. What do you think I expected? Someone who belongs in your world. Someone elegant and confident who knows how to navigate society, how to be an asset to a man like you. She recited it like memorized lines. Someone who won't embarrass you. And you think you'll embarrassment me? I know I will. The admission was barely audible. I wasn't raised for this. I don't know the rules, the games. I'll make mistakes. Then why agree to the marriage? Her laugh was bitter and broken. As if I had a choice. The words hung between them, confirming what Dominic had begun to suspect. Your uncle said you were prepared for this role. Prepared? She repeated the word hollowly. Yes, I suppose that's one way to describe it. They told me what would be expected, what I would need to do, how I would need to behave. Her hands twisted in her lap. They didn't ask if I wanted it. They just told me it was necessary. Necessary for what? Her expression shuddered. My family's security, their debts. The arrangement benefits everyone. She straightened her shoulders, trying for dignity. I understand how these things work, Mr. Vale. I'm not naive enough to expect love or even kindness. I'll fulfill my part of the contract. I'll give you heirs, maintain your household, appear at your side when required. I won't cause trouble or make demands. Each word was like a knife between his ribs. She was offering herself up like a sacrifice, resigned to a fate she clearly dreaded. And what do you expect from me? His voice came out rougher than intended. She flinched. Nothing beyond what the contract stipulates. I know you have other arrangements for companionship. I won't interfere or complain. I only ask... She stopped, seeming to reconsider. Ask what? That you're discreet. I don't want to be humiliated publicly. Her chin lifted slightly. I may be powerless in this situation, but I'd like to keep some dignity. Arrangements for companionship. She thought he kept mistresses, would continue to do so after their marriage, and she was already accepting it, bargaining only for discretion. Dominic stood, needing movement to process this conversation. He walked to the window, staring out at the glittering city below. Behind him, he heard her breathing quicken, probably interpreting his silence as anger. I don't keep mistresses, he said without turning around. I've never needed the complication. Oh, a pause. I see. Do you? He turns to face her. Because I'm beginning to think you see very little clearly. You've been told what to expect from this marriage, but those expectations are based on assumptions that may not be accurate. Her eyes widened slightly. I don't understand. I'm not a good man, Serafina. I've done things that would horrify you. I've built my empire through calculated ruthlessness, and I don't apologize for that. He moved closer, watching her fight the urge to retreat. But I'm not a monster. I don't force women into my bed. I don't take pleasure in causing fear. The contract was negotiated by your uncle and my lawyers. You and I had no say in its terms. He sat in the chair beside hers rather than looming over her. But here's what I can tell you. I have no intention of making you miserable. This marriage serves a purpose. Stability, alliance, legitimacy. Those things don't require your suffering. You're saying you won't... She couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying that what happens between us will be negotiated by us, not by a piece of paper your uncle signed. He kept his voice level, non-threatening. You're clearly terrified of me. That needs to change before anything else happens. Tears suddenly spilled down her cheeks, startling them both. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't... This isn't professional. Professional? The word sounded absurd in this context. I mean, appropriate. I should be composed. I shouldn't cry or show emotion. I know that's not what you... She pressed her hands to her face, trying to stem the tears that kept flowing. I'm ruining everything. Dominic found himself doing something he never did, acting on impulse rather than calculation. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her. You're not ruining anything. You're having a reasonable emotional response to an overwhelming situation. She took the handkerchief with shaking hands, dabbing at her eyes. You must think I'm pathetic. I think you're scared. He waited until she looked at him. And I think someone should have asked what you wanted before signing away your life. What I wanted? She laughed, the sound hollow. No one has ever asked me that. Not once. The admission settled like a weight in his chest. Dominic had built his empire by understanding people, their motivations, their weaknesses, their pressure points. He'd learned to read body language and tone to distinguish between genuine emotion and performance. Everything about Serafina Castellanos screamed genuine. Genuine fear, genuine resignation, genuine despair. "The wedding is in 3 days," he said quietly. "I can't stop it without causing problems that would hurt us both. But what happens after, that's negotiable." "What does that mean?" "It means we have time to figure this out, to establish terms that work for both of us, not just the families who arranged this." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Starting with the wedding night." She paled. "I understand that's when—" "Nothing happens on the wedding night except whatever you're comfortable with. We'll have separate rooms, space to breathe and adjust. But the families will expect us to consummate the marriage. What they expect and what actually happens are two different things." His tone brooked no argument. "I'm not interested in forcing myself on a terrified bride. That's not how I operate." She stared at him as if he'd spoken a foreign language. "I don't understand. Why would you—" "The contract states—" "The contract isn't the final word on how we live our lives." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. Stop apologizing for existing. You've done nothing wrong." "But I'm not what you wanted." He considered that. "No, you're not. But what I wanted was a business transaction masquerading as a marriage. Maybe having something real, even if it's real fear and real uncertainty, is better than another perfectly executed deal." The words surprised him even as he spoke them. When had he started thinking of marriage as potentially anything other than a strategic move? They returned to the living room where the other guests waited, their absence having been noted but not commented on. Vincent watched Dominic with wary eyes, clearly trying to gauge what had transpired. Gabriella fussed over Serafina, touching her arm and whispering questions the younger woman deflected with practiced politeness. The evening wound down with excruciating slowness. Toasts were made to the happy couple's future. Plans were finalized for the wedding ceremony at St. Patrick's Cathedral, a grand affair with 500 guests, most of whom Dominic barely knew. His mother, living in quiet retirement in Sicily, had sent her blessing via phone call, her voice frail but pleased that her son was finally settling down. If only she knew how unsettled everything actually was. When the guests finally departed, Dominic found himself alone in his penthouse with a bottle of whiskey and too many thoughts. He'd entered this arrangement with clinical detachment, viewing it as he would any business merger. Sign the papers, fulfill the obligations, maintain the appearance of normalcy while continuing his operations without disruption. But Serafina had disrupted everything simply by being afraid. The next 3 days passed in a blur of final preparations. Dominic threw himself into work, finalizing a shipping contract that would expand his operations into the Mediterranean. He met with his security chief to discuss potential threats, rivals who might see the wedding as an opportunity to strike, old enemies who held grudges. He didn't see Serafina again until the rehearsal dinner. She arrived with her family, wearing a simple cream dress that made her look younger than her 23 years. The fear was still there, but she'd learned to mask it better, smiling at the appropriate moments and making polite conversation with guests. Only Dominic, watching closely, saw how her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. During the rehearsal at the cathedral, they walked through the ceremony's choreography. The priest, a man who'd known Dominic's family for decades, spoke about the sanctity of marriage, the commitment they were making before their higher power. Dominic noticed how Serafina went very still during the speech, her breathing shallow. "You okay?" he murmured when the priest moved on to discuss the reception timeline. "Fine." The lie was automatic. "Serafina." He waited until she looked at him. "You can be honest with me." "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Is that honest enough?" "Yes." He wanted to say more, to offer reassurance, but his own certainty was wavering. This marriage was supposed to be simple, a transaction, an alliance. Instead, it was becoming complicated in ways he hadn't anticipated. The wedding day arrived with crystalline winter sunshine. Dominic stood in his dressing room at the church, adjusting his tie while his best man, Carlo, his oldest friend and most trusted lieutenant, poured whiskey. "To the end of your freedom," Carlo toasted with a grin. "I was never free." Dominic took the glass but didn't drink. "This just makes the chains more visible." "That's dark, even for you." Carlo studied him. "You having second thoughts?" "Too late for that." "It's never too late." We could call it off, weather the political fallout. No. Dominic set down the glass. This alliance is too important. And besides, he stopped, unsure how to articulate what he was feeling. Besides what? She needs this wedding to happen. Her family has her trapped in this situation. Calling it off would just leave her vulnerable to whatever other arrangement they'd make. Carlo's eyebrows rose. You're doing this to protect her? I'm doing this because it's the smart play. But even as he said it, Dominic knew it wasn't entirely true. Somewhere in the past few days, his motivation had shifted from pure strategic thinking to something messier, more personal. The ceremony began with the precision of a military operation. 500 guests filled St. Patrick's Cathedral, a sea of expensive suits and designer gowns. Dominic stood at the altar, Carlo beside him, watching the doors at the far end of the aisle. Then the music swelled, and Serafina appeared. She was stunning, a vision in ivory silk and delicate lace, her dark hair swept up to reveal the graceful curve of her neck. The veil obscured her face, but Dominic could see enough to know she was barely holding herself together. Her father, a nervous-looking man who'd barely spoken during the engagement dinner, walked beside her with a firm grip on her arm. As they processed down the aisle, Dominic found himself cataloging details. The way her bouquet shook slightly, the rigid set of her shoulders, the measured pace of her steps, as if she were marching to her own execution. When they reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Dominic's and stepped back. Through the veil, Serafina's eyes met his, wide, terrified, resigned. I'm sorry, he wanted to say. I'm sorry you're trapped in this. But the priest was speaking, leading them through vows that felt simultaneously meaningful and hollow. Dominic said the words clearly, firmly, a declaration witnessed by hundreds. Serafina's voice was barely audible, each I do sounding more like a question than an answer. When it came time to lift her veil, Dominic moved slowly, giving her time to adjust. Her face was pale, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Beautiful and broken. You can do this, he murmured, too quiet for anyone else to hear. She nodded once, a tiny movement. The kiss was brief and chaste, his lips barely brushing hers before he pulled back. She tasted like tears and expensive lipstick, and he felt her entire body trembling against him. Then it was done. The priest presented them as Mr. and Mrs. Vale, and the congregation erupted in applause. Dominic took Serafina's arm and they walked back down the aisle together, husband and wife, bound by law and contract and the expectations of two powerful families. The reception was held at the Plaza Hotel in a ballroom that had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers, white roses by the thousands, a 12-piece orchestra playing elegant waltzes. Dominic and Serafina sat at the head table, playing their roles perfectly. He made toasts, thanked guests, accepted congratulations. She smiled and nodded, speaking when spoken to, eating almost nothing despite the 7-course meal. During their first dance, he held her carefully, as if she might shatter. Just a few more hours, he said quietly. Then you can breathe. Can I? Her voice was hollow. Or is this just the beginning? Of what? Of having to pretend everything is fine when it's not. He wanted to argue, to tell her it would get better, but he didn't make promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Instead, he just held her as they moved through the motions of the dance, surrounded by hundreds of people who had no idea how wrong everything felt. The party continued long into the night. Dominic worked the room, cementing alliances and making small talk with business associates who'd come to pay their respects. Vincent was in his element, already drunk and boasting about the merger's success. Gabriella kept Serafina close, steering her through conversations and preventing any awkward moments. It was nearly midnight when they finally left, bundled into the back of Dominic's car, while guests threw rose petals and shouted congratulations. The drive to his penthouse, their penthouse now, took 20 minutes through mostly empty streets. Serafina sat as far from him as possible in the back seat, staring out the window at the passing city. Her wedding dress took up most of the space between them, layers of silk and tulle creating a physical barrier that felt metaphorical. There's a guest room prepared for you, Dominic said as they rode the private elevator to the penthouse. Your things have been moved there. Take whatever time you need. She turned to look at him, surprise clear on her face. You meant it. About separate rooms. I always mean what I say. But people will know. Your staff, my staff are paid extremely well to mind their own business and keep their mouths shut. The elevator doors opened. No one will know anything we don't want them to know. He led her through the penthouse to the guest wing, a suite of rooms that rivaled many luxury hotel accommodations. Her suitcases sat neatly beside the closet, and someone had left fresh flowers on the dresser. Thank you. She stood in the middle of the room, still wearing her wedding gown, looking lost. I don't know what else to say. You don't have to say anything. Dominic moved toward the door, then paused. But Serafina? Tomorrow we start figuring out how to make this work. Not for the families or the business, for us. What if it can't work? Then we'll deal with that too. He met her eyes. But we won't know until we try. He left her there and retreated to his own room, suddenly exhausted. The day had been endless, the weight of performance and expectation pressing down until he could barely breathe. He stripped off his tuxedo, poured whiskey he didn't really want, and stood at his window looking out at the city he'd conquered, a city that felt emptier tonight than it ever had before. Somewhere in the guest wing, his wife, his terrified, unwilling wife, was probably crying herself to sleep on their wedding night. And Dominic Vale, the man who'd built an empire through ruthless calculation, had no idea how to fix what had been broken before it even began. Morning arrived with pale winter light filtering through unfamiliar curtains. Serafina woke disoriented, her wedding dress still pooled on the floor where she'd finally managed to remove it at 3 a.m. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. The penthouse. The marriage. The man sleeping somewhere down the hall who now legally owned every aspect of her existence. She'd expected him to come to her room during the night, had lain awake for hours, heart pounding, waiting for the door to open. Her aunt had been explicit about what would be expected on the wedding night, describing it in clinical terms that made Serafina's stomach turn. But the door had remained closed. The silence had been complete except for the distant hum of the city below. Now, in daylight, she wasn't sure if she felt relieved or simply postponed. A soft knock startled her. Mrs. Vale? A woman's voice, accented and professional. I have breakfast for you. Serafina grabbed a robe and opened the door to find a woman in her 50s holding a tray. I'm Maria, she said with a warm smile. I manage the household. Mr. Vale thought you might prefer to eat in your room this morning. Thank you. Serafina took the tray, noticing it held fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee that smelled like heaven. Is Mr. Vale here? He left for his office an hour ago. He said to tell you there's no rush. Take your time settling in. Maria's eyes were kind. If you need anything, just press the button by your bed. I'm here to help. After Maria left, Serafina ate mechanically, tasting nothing. The penthouse around her was beautiful but sterile, all expensive furniture and artwork that probably cost more than her family's house. She explored her suite slowly, a bedroom with an enormous bed, a bathroom with marble everything, a walk-in closet already filled with clothes she'd never seen before, designer labels, perfect sizes. Someone had been very thorough. She was examining a dress that probably cost thousands when her phone buzzed. Her aunt. You survived the night, Gabriella said without preamble. Good. Now listen carefully. Dominic left for work, which means he's already disappointed. Men like him expect their wives to be waiting when they get home, showered, dressed beautifully, ready to provide comfort and conversation. You need to establish yourself as indispensable. He told me to take my time. He was being polite. Trust me, Serafina, I've been married to powerful men. They say one thing and expect another. Your job is to anticipate his needs before he voices them. Tonight, have dinner ready. Wear something attractive but not desperate. And for heaven's sake, smile. No man wants to come home to a weeping wife. The call ended before Serafina could respond. She stared at the phone, feeling the familiar weight of expectations settling over her shoulders. Her entire life had been about anticipating what others wanted, morphing herself into whatever shape kept everyone else comfortable. But Dominic had said they would negotiate their own terms. The thought was foreign and frightening. What did she even want? No one had ever asked. She spent the day exploring the penthouse like a prisoner mapping her cell. The main living area was all windows and expensive minimalism. Dominic's study was locked. The kitchen was pristine and clearly belonged to professional staff rather than family cooking. There was a gym, a library filled with books on business and history, a media room with seating for 12. Everything was perfect and empty. Around 4 in the afternoon, Maria found her in the library. Mrs. Vale, I'm starting dinner preparations. Do you have any preferences? Serafina remembered her aunt's instructions. What does Mr. Vale usually prefer? He's not particular. Usually eats at his desk or at business dinners. Maria studied her. But perhaps tonight is different. Perhaps you'd like to create something special. I don't know how to cook. The admission felt like failure. Maria's smile was gentle. Then perhaps we cook together. I can teach you what he likes. They spent the next 2 hours in the kitchen, Maria patiently explaining techniques while Serafina chopped vegetables and tried not to think about what would happen when Dominic came home. She was wearing one of the new dresses, a simple navy sheath that Maria had assured her was appropriate, and had actually managed to eat lunch. Small victories. At 6:30, she heard the elevator. Her heart immediately started racing, that familiar fear flooding back. She was setting the table when he walked in, still wearing his suit, looking tired and somehow more human than he had at the wedding. You didn't have to do this. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the dining room table set for two, the smell of food from the kitchen. My aunt said, she stopped herself. I thought you might be hungry. His expression shifted, something unreadable crossing his face. Your aunt has a lot of opinions about what you should do. She's trying to help me not fail at this. And what does failing look like to you? The question caught her off guard. Disappointing you. Making you regret the marriage. Dominic loosened his tie and moved to the bar, pouring whiskey. Want some? I don't drink much. Might help with the fear. He poured a second glass anyway, bringing both to where she stood frozen by the table. Here, we're going to have a conversation, and you being terrified the entire time isn't productive. She took the glass with shaking hands, sipped, and felt fire slide down her throat. What kind of conversation? The kind where you tell me the truth about your situation, and I figure out how to make this marriage something other than a nightmare for both of us. He gestured to the table. But first, let's eat. Maria's cooking is too good to waste. Dinner was surreal. Dominic asked her questions, normal questions about her life, her interests, her education. She answered cautiously at first, waiting for the trap. But he seemed genuinely curious, listening when she mentioned her love of art history, asking follow-up questions about her time in Paris. I wanted to study conservation, she admitted, the whiskey making her brave. Work in museums, restore old paintings. But my father said it wasn't practical, that I should focus on languages and social graces instead. Because those skills would make you more marriageable. Exactly. She took another sip. Everything was about preparing for this, for marriage to someone important. I just didn't know who until 3 months ago when Uncle Vincent told me about the contract. 3 months? Dominic's jaw tightened. They only told you 3 months ago? Is that unusual? Serafina, most arranged marriages in our world are discussed for years. The couple meets multiple times, gets to know each other, has some say in the timeline. He refilled her glass. 3 months is barely enough time to process, let alone prepare. I wasn't supposed to process. I was supposed to comply. The words came easier now, the whiskey, or maybe just his apparent willingness to listen, loosening something inside her. They told me what would happen, what would be expected. They said you were powerful and ruthless, that I needed to be perfect, or you'd make life difficult for my family. Who said that? My aunt, my father, even my mother, though she cried when she said it. Serafina stared at her plate. They made it sound like you were some kind of monster who'd punish them if I didn't perform correctly. The silence that followed was heavy. When she finally looked up, Dominic's expression was cold fury barely contained. They terrorized you into this marriage. They prepared me. They terrorized you, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. They filled your head with nightmares about me and sent you into this situation expecting abuse. No wonder you've been terrified. Aren't you? The question escaped before she could stop it. A monster, I mean. Everyone says you are. They say you've done terrible things, that people disappear when they cross you. He didn't flinch from the accusation. I've done terrible things. People have disappeared. I've built my empire through calculated violence when necessary, and I don't lose sleep over removing threats. His eyes met hers. But there's a difference between being ruthless in business and being a monster to innocent people. I don't hurt people who haven't hurt me first. I don't take pleasure in causing fear, and I sure as hell don't terrorize women into my bed. Then why marry me at all? If the contract was so problematic, why go through with it? Because breaking it would have caused a war between families, and wars are expensive and bloody. He leaned back, studying her. And because by the time I realized how wrong this all was, Canceling would have left you in an impossible position. Your family would have blamed you, found another arrangement, maybe worse than this one. The thought hadn't occurred to her, but now that he said it, she knew he was right. Her family's debts were real, their desperation palpable. If this marriage had fallen through, they would have found another solution, another powerful man willing to trade his name for their connections. So you married me out of what? Pity? Pragmatism, he corrected. The alliance still serves its purpose. But I'm not interested in having a wife who flinches every time I enter a room. That's not sustainable for either of us. What do you want instead? Honestly, I don't know yet. He finished his whiskey. But I know what I don't want. I don't want you living in fear. I don't want every interaction to feel like a negotiation. I don't want to be the monster your family convinced you I am. Serafina felt something shifting inside her, a tiny crack in the wall of terror she'd built. I don't know how to not be afraid of you. Then we start small. He stood, beginning to clear plates. Tomorrow, I want you to do something you enjoy. Not what you think I want. Not what your aunt says you should do. Something that makes you happy. I don't know if I remember what that is. The admission hung in the air between them, sad and honest. Dominic paused, holding plates, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then we figure it out together, he said quietly. That night, he walked her to her door and said goodnight without touching her. She lay in bed, slightly dizzy from whiskey and entirely confused by this man who kept defying her expectations. Nothing was going as she'd been told it would. He was supposed to use her, demand her compliance, treat her as property. Instead, he was asking what she wanted and telling her to find happiness. It didn't make sense. The next morning, she woke to find a note slipped under her door in bold handwriting. Car and driver available whenever you want. Go somewhere, see something, spend money. Just don't spend the day hiding in your room. D. She held the note, reading it 3 times, trying to decode hidden meanings. Was this a test? Was he checking if she'd obey instructions? But the note said to do what she wanted, which was the opposite of an order. Maria found her in the kitchen, still holding the note. Mr. Vale said you might need suggestions for places to visit. Did he tell you to babysit me? He told me to help you explore the city. Maria's smile was knowing. There's a difference. They settled on the Metropolitan Museum, a place Serafina had visited once during her time in New York, but never had time to truly explore. The driver, a quiet man named Thomas, who'd apparently worked for Dominic for years, dropped her at the entrance with instructions to call when she was ready to leave. The museum was glorious. Serafina wandered through galleries, losing herself in Renaissance paintings and ancient sculptures. In the conservation wing, she watched restorers at work through glass partitions, their careful hands repairing centuries-old damage. This was what she'd wanted to do, what she'd dreamed of before duty had crushed those dreams. She was studying a Caravaggio when her phone rang. Dominic. Are you okay? His voice carried an edge of concern. I'm at the Met, looking at paintings. She felt defensive. You said to do something I enjoy. I know. I'm just checking in. You've been gone for 4 hours. 4 hours. She hadn't even noticed. I'm sorry. I should have... Serafina, you're not in trouble. Stay as long as you want. I was just making sure Thomas didn't abandon you somewhere. Oh. She processed this. You were worried about me? A pause. Is that so surprising? Yes, actually. She moved to a quieter corner. No one usually worries about where I am or what I'm doing. We'll get used to it. You're my wife. That means I care if you're safe and happy. He said it matter-of-factly, as if it were obvious. I have meetings until 7. If you're back by then, we can have dinner. If not, that's fine too. He hung up before she could respond, leaving her staring at her phone in confusion. This man kept saying things that contradicted everything she'd been taught to expect. Care about her safety and happiness. In her family's world, wives were accessories, their feelings irrelevant as long as they fulfilled their functions. She returned to the penthouse at 6:30, energized by the afternoon in ways she hadn't felt in months. Dominic was already there, changed into casual clothes, jeans, and a sweater that made him look younger, less intimidating. Good day? He asked, looking up from papers spread across the coffee table. Amazing, actually. She couldn't keep the enthusiasm from her voice. They have this new exhibition on Renaissance techniques, and the restoration work they're doing on the Vermeers is incredible. The way they use X-rays to see under the paint layers. She stopped, suddenly self-conscious. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't interpret. What? You're smiling. He said it simply. First time I've seen it. She touched her face, surprised. I didn't realize. Art makes you happy. It used to, before... She trailed off. Before your family decided your dreams didn't matter? His tone was sharp. Serafina, I need you to understand something. I didn't marry you to crush what little joy you have left. If art makes you happy, pursue it. Take classes, volunteer at museums, do whatever you want. Why? The question burst out. Why do you care if I'm happy? The contract doesn't require it. You could just what? Lock you in a golden cage and ignore you except when I need you on my arm at events? He stood, moving closer. That's not who I am. And more importantly, I'm starting to realize that having an unhappy wife is its own kind of cage for me. I don't understand. I know you don't. You've been trained to think of yourself as a transaction, a piece of property. But here's the thing. I don't want property. He stopped, seeming to search for words. I want someone who can sit across from me at dinner and talk about something other than obligation and fear. I want someone who smiles sometimes. I want a partner, not a prisoner. That's not what arranged marriages are supposed to be. Says who? The same people who terrorized you into this situation? He shook his head. We're making new rules, remember? Over the next week, they fell into an unexpected routine. Dominic left early for work, leaving notes with suggestions, museums to visit, galleries to explore, even a course catalog from NYU's Art Conservation Program with certain classes circled. Serafina spent her days discovering the city and rediscovering herself, returning each evening to dinners where they talked about everything except the elephant in the room. Her family called constantly. Gabriella wanted updates on her progress with Dominic, asking intrusive questions about their intimacy that made Serafina's skin crawl. Vincent called to ensure she was keeping him satisfied. Her father called to remind her how much was riding on this marriage's success. She lied to all of them, describing a conventional arrangement that didn't exist. They're calling again, Dominic observed one evening, watching her phone buzz for the 5th time during dinner. They're checking on their investment. She silenced it. Making sure I'm fulfilling my purpose. And what do you tell them? Whatever they want to hear? She met his eyes. That you're pleased with me. That everything is going according to plan. Is it? His voice was quiet. Going according to plan? I don't think either of us has a plan anymore. The truth of it settled between them. They were in uncharted territory, neither following the script they'd been given. Somewhere along the way, this arrangement had stopped being about family obligations and started being about two people trying to figure out how to coexist. But there were still complications neither of them had addressed. It came to a head 2 weeks after the wedding. Serafina was getting ready for their first public appearance as a couple, a charity gala where the city's elite would gather to see the new Mrs. Vale. Maria had helped her into a stunning emerald gown, and she was attempting to clasp a diamond necklace when Dominic appeared in her doorway. Let me. He took the necklace, his fingers brushing her neck as he fastened it. The touch was brief but electric, and she felt her breath catch. In the mirror, she saw him notice her reaction, saw something flicker in his eyes. Awareness, maybe? Or regret? I should tell you, he said quietly, hands still resting lightly on her shoulders. There will be questions tonight. About us? About the marriage. People will be watching to see if we're convincing. Convincing as what? As a real couple, not a business arrangement. His eyes met hers in the mirror. We'll need to play the part. Touching, smiling, looking like we can't keep our hands off each other. Her heart started racing. I don't know if I can... I know. His hands dropped away. But it's important. There are people at this event who would exploit any sign of weakness. If they think our marriage is unstable, they'll use it against me. Against us. What do I need to do? Stay close to me. Let me touch you. Your hand, your back, nothing inappropriate. Smile like you're enjoying yourself. If anyone asks intrusive questions, deflect with charm. He turned her to face him. Can you do that? She wanted to say no. Wanted to admit that the thought of being on display, of pretending intimacy she didn't feel, made her want to hide. But she saw something in his expression, not demand but request. He was asking, not ordering. I'll try. The gala was held at a historic mansion overlooking the Hudson, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers. The guest list read like a who's who of New York power: politicians, business moguls, old money aristocrats. Dominic kept his word, staying close, his hand warm at the small of her back as they navigated the crowd. Dominic, and this must be the lovely bride. A silver-haired man appeared with a woman dripping in diamonds. Marcus Rothwell, this is my wife, Catherine. Pleasure. Dominic shook hands smoothly. Serafina, Marcus runs most of the private banking on the East Coast. How wonderful to finally meet you, dear. Catherine's smile was sharp. We were all so surprised by Dominic's sudden marriage. He's been such a confirmed bachelor. Sometimes the right person changes everything, Dominic said easily, pulling Serafina closer. Isn't that right, darling? The endearment should have sounded false, but his voice carried a warmth that made it almost believable. Serafina forced a smile. Absolutely. And how did you two meet? Catherine's eyes were predatory. I don't recall seeing you at any of the usual events. My family knows Dominic's. The prepared answer came smoothly. We were introduced through mutual friends. How lovely, and so romantic, I'm sure. Catherine's tone suggested she believed nothing of the sort. You must tell me everything about the wedding. I heard it was quite the affair. They spent 20 minutes deflecting Catherine's increasingly invasive questions before Dominic excused them to speak with the senator. As they walked away, his hand slipped into hers, fingers intertwining. You did well, he murmured. She's one of the worst gossips in the city. If you'd stumbled, it would be all over town by morning. Is everyone here analyzing us? Most of them? He guided her toward the bar. Champagne? Please. As he ordered drinks, a younger man approached, handsome in an obvious way, with styled hair and a suit that screamed money. Dominic Vale. Heard you finally got yourself a ball and chain. Marcus, Dominic's voice cooled several degrees. Didn't expect to see you here. Wouldn't miss it. Been dying to meet the woman who tamed the infamous Dominic Vale. Marcus turned to Serafina, his smile predatory. Marcus Castellano. I'm your cousin, technically. Our families are distantly related. Serafina felt Dominic tense beside her. I don't think we've met. I've been abroad. Just got back last week. Marcus's eyes raked over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Have to say, Uncle Vincent described you differently. Said you were plain, boring, but you're quite the beauty. That's enough. Dominic's voice carried a warning. Just making conversation. Can't a man compliment his cousin? Marcus took a sip of his drink, still watching Serafina. Though I have to wonder what a sweet thing like you is doing with someone like Dominic. Do you know what he is? What he's done? I said that's enough. Relax. I'm just curious if she knows she married a killer. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Serafina felt everyone nearby go silent, watching to see what would happen. Dominic's expression was ice, his hand tightening around hers. Interesting choice of words, Marcus. His voice was dangerously soft. Especially coming from someone whose own hands aren't exactly clean. Should we discuss your activities in Prague? Marcus paled. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Because I have extensive documentation of gentlemen. An older woman intervened smoothly, appearing between them with practiced grace. Perhaps we save the family catching up for a less public venue? Marcus retreated with a final glare, and the woman turned to Serafina with kind eyes. I apologize for my grandson's behavior. He's always had more mouth than sense. I'm Eleanor Rothwell, Marcus's grandmother. The Rothwells and Castellanos have complicated history, Dominic explained, his anger visibly controlled. Marcus likes to stir up trouble. Indeed, he does. Eleanor studied Serafina. But he wasn't entirely wrong, was he, dear? You do look rather overwhelmed by all this. I'm fine. Of course you are. Eleanor's smile was knowing. But perhaps some advice from someone who's been in your position? These events are performances. Everyone here is playing a role. Powerful, confident, unshakable. The trick is remembering it's all theater. Real life happens later in private. Out here, you're just playing your part. She drifted away, leaving Serafina processing her words. Theater, performance. None of this was real. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Dominic was masterful, charming, and intimidating by turns, always keeping Serafina close. She played her role, smiling, laughing at appropriate moments, letting him touch her hand or her back without flinching. But Marcus's words kept echoing. Killer. Was it true? She knew Dominic was dangerous, that he'd done things that would horrify her, but hearing it said so bluntly made it real in a way she'd been avoiding. They left around midnight, exhausted from hours of performance. In the car, Serafina stared out the window, trying to process everything. "You're quiet." Dominic's voice broke the silence. "Tired." "Serafina." He waited until she looked at him. "What Marcus said, is it true? That I've killed people?" He didn't flinch from the question. "Yes." The confirmation shouldn't have shocked her, but it did. "How many?" "Does it matter?" "I don't know, maybe." She searched his face. "Who were they?" "Men who threatened my family, my business, my life. Rivals who couldn't be reasoned with. Traitors who sold information to enemies." His voice was matter-of-fact. "I've never killed anyone who wasn't dangerous to me or mine. I've never killed anyone innocent." "And that makes it okay?" "No. It makes it necessary." He leaned back, looking tired. "I won't apologize for surviving in a world where weakness gets you killed. I won't pretend I'm something I'm not. But I need you to understand. The violence in my life has never been random or cruel. It's been strategic and controlled." "Do you enjoy it?" "No." The answer was immediate. "I'm good at it. That's different from enjoying it." She didn't know what to say. This was the reality of the world she'd married into, a world where death was business, where killing was just another tool. Her family had told her Dominic was dangerous, but they'd framed it as something that made him powerful. They'd never discussed the actual cost. "I understand if this changes things," Dominic said quietly. "If knowing what I am makes you more afraid." "Did it?" She examined her feelings, expecting terror, but what she found was something else, a strange kind of clarity. Dominic had never lied to her. He'd told her he'd done terrible things. He'd been honest about who he was. Unlike her family, who'd lied and manipulated and dressed up their cage as protection. "I don't know what I feel," she admitted, "but I don't think I'm more afraid. Is that wrong?" "I don't know." He sounded surprised. "But I'm glad you're not." They rode the rest of the way in silence. When they reached the penthouse, Dominic walked her to her door as he did every night. But tonight, he paused before leaving. "You were impressive tonight. Playing the role, handling the questions. You're stronger than you think you are." "I was pretending." "So was I." His smile was slight. But pretending to be strong is the first step to actually being strong. He left her with that thought, disappearing into his own wing of the penthouse. Serafina changed out of her gown slowly, processing the evening. She'd survived her first test as Mrs. Dominic Vale. She'd played the part, smiled on cue, deflected invasive questions. And somehow, despite everything, she'd felt almost safe with Dominic's hand on her back, his presence at her side. It should have terrified her that her sense of safety came from a man who'd admitted to killing people. Instead, it just felt like another piece of the complicated puzzle her life had become. The nightmare came 3 weeks into the marriage, shattering the fragile peace they'd been building. Serafina woke gasping, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might break through her ribs. The dream had been vivid and terrible. Her father's study, men in suits discussing her like merchandise, hands reaching for her that she couldn't escape. She'd been trying to scream, but no sound would come. She pressed her hands over her mouth to muffle the sobs that were fighting their way out, not wanting to wake anyone. But the panic was overwhelming, crushing her chest until she couldn't breathe properly. The walls of her beautiful bedroom felt like they were closing in. She stumbled out of bed, needing air, needing space. The penthouse was dark except for the city lights filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. She made it to the living room before her legs gave out, and she sank onto the cool marble floor, drawing her knees to her chest. "Serafina?" She jerked her head up to find Dominic standing in the hallway, wearing only sleep pants, his hair disheveled. He must have heard her moving around. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." Her voice came out broken, humiliating. He crossed the room quickly, dropping to a crouch in front of her. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Just a nightmare." "I'm fine." "You're shaking." His hand reached out, then hesitated. "Can I touch you?" The question surprised her enough that she nodded. His hand settled on her shoulder, warm and steady, and somehow that simple touch made everything worse. The tears she'd been fighting broke free, and suddenly she was sobbing, ugly, desperate crying that she couldn't control. Dominic didn't speak. He just shifted to sit beside her on the floor, his arm around her shoulders, letting her fall apart. She cried for everything, for the childhood spent preparing to be sold, for the dreams she'd abandoned, for the terror of her wedding night, for the confusion of living with a man who kept defying every expectation. When the storm finally passed, she was exhausted and embarrassed, very aware that she'd just broken down completely in front of him. "I'm sorry, that was human," he said quietly. "That was human, Serafina. You're allowed to have feelings. My aunt says emotions are weakness, that showing them gives people power over you. Your aunt is wrong about a lot of things." He stood, offering his hand. "Come on, you need something to drink." In the kitchen, he made tea, an oddly domestic gesture from a man who probably had people to do such things for him. They sat at the counter in comfortable silence until her breathing had steadied. "The dream," he said eventually, "was it about the wedding?" "Before that. The day my father told me about the arrangement." She wrapped her hands around the warm mug. "He called me into his study. Uncle Vincent was there, and some other men I didn't know. They were discussing terms like I wasn't even in the room, how much my family would receive, what my duties would be when the wedding would happen. I tried to ask questions, but my father told me to be quiet, that this was grown-up business, and I needed to accept it gracefully. How old were you when this happened?" 23, 3 months ago." She saw his jaw tighten. "I know in your world this is normal. It's not normal to exclude the person whose life you're deciding. It's not normal to treat a grown woman like a child who has no say." His voice was controlled anger. "Your family didn't prepare you for this marriage, Serafina. They traumatized you into it. They did what they thought was necessary. Necessary for them, not for you." He turned his mug slowly, studying it. "Can I ask you something? And I need you to be honest." "Okay." "Do you hate me?" The question startled her. "What? No. Why would you think that?" "Because I'm the reason you're in this situation. If I'd refused the contract, walked away from the deal, you wouldn't be trapped here. I'd be trapped somewhere else, with someone who probably wouldn't ask if they could touch me or tell me to find things that make me happy." She met his eyes. "You're not the villain in my story, Dominic. You're just the person who ended up stuck in the same cage." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. "For what it's worth, I don't think of this as a cage anymore." "What do you think of it as?" "I'm still figuring that out." He finished his tea. "But I know I like having someone to have dinner with. Someone who gets excited about art conservation techniques and doesn't care about quarterly earnings reports. Someone real." The word hung between them, fragile and honest. Real. In a world built on performance and calculation, they'd somehow stumbled into something authentic. "I should let you sleep," he said, standing. "But Serafina, if you have another nightmare, you can wake me. You don't have to suffer alone." After he left, she sat in the kitchen for a long time, processing what had just happened. She'd broken down in front of him, shown him weakness, and he'd responded with kindness instead of contempt. Every interaction with Dominic seemed to chip away at the walls she'd built, leaving her vulnerable in ways that should terrify her, but somehow didn't. The next morning, she found a package outside her door. Inside was a book on Renaissance painting techniques and a note in his bold handwriting. "Thought you might enjoy this. There's also information about a conservation workshop at the Met next month. Let me know if you want to attend. D. She held the book, something warm unfurling in her chest. He'd been listening when she talked about her interests. He'd remembered and followed through. Such a small gesture, but it felt monumental. Over breakfast, Maria mentioned casually, "Mr. Vale asked me to find out if you have any preferences for redecorating your room. He said if you're going to live here, you should make it yours." He said that. He also mentioned something about converting one of the spare rooms into a studio if you wanted space for art projects. Maria's smile was knowing. "He's trying, Mrs. Vale." "I know." And that was the problem. Every kind gesture, every thoughtful action made it harder to maintain the emotional distance she'd thought necessary for survival. She was starting to care about him, and that was dangerous. That afternoon, her mother called. "Serafina, darling, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "What is it? Are you happy?" Her mother's voice was tentative, afraid. "With Dominic, with the marriage, are you okay?" The question surprised her. Her mother had been part of the arrangement, had cried when explaining what would be expected, but had never questioned whether it should happen.
Adjusting, Serafina said carefully. It's not what I expected.
Good different or bad different? I don't know yet. She moved to the window, looking out at the city. He's not who you and Father described. He's not cruel or demanding. He actually seems to care if I'm comfortable. Her mother was quiet for a long moment. Your father and I, we thought we were protecting you, making sure you'd be secure, taken care of. But lately I've been wondering if we did the right thing. Why the change of heart? Because I remember being 23. I remember my own arranged marriage to your father, how terrified I was. A shaky breath. I told myself it was different for you, that we'd prepared you better, but we didn't, did we? We just made you more afraid. Serafina felt tears threatening again. Mama, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry we didn't fight harder for you to have a choice. Her mother's voice broke. If he's kind to you, if he's treating you well, then maybe something good can come from our mistakes. But if he's not, if you're suffering, you tell me. You hear me? You tell me, and we'll find a way out. After the call ended, Serafina sat with her mother's words, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. The knowledge that someone in her family actually cared about her happiness, rather than just her compliance. That evening, Dominic came home earlier than usual, finding her in the library with the book he'd given her. How's the reading? Fascinating. Did you know they used to grind up precious stones to make certain pigments? Lapis lazuli for ultramarine blue, which was more expensive than gold. I didn't know that. He poured himself whiskey, then hesitated. I have something to discuss with you. A business dinner next week with some partners from Italy. They're traditional, expect wives to attend. It would help if you were there. Of course. She'd known this would be part of her role. But here's the thing. These men, they're old school. They'll ask you questions, try to gauge how much you know about my business. Some of what they discuss won't be legal or comfortable. You're warning me I'll hear things I shouldn't? I'm warning you that playing the decorative wife won't work with them. They respect intelligence and strength. If you seem weak or clueless, they'll view it as my weakness. He sat across from her. Can you handle that? Handle pretending to be strong? Handle actually being strong. His eyes were serious. I've watched you these past weeks. You're tougher than you think. You survived your family's manipulation, survived marrying a stranger, survived realizing what I am. You keep showing up, keep trying. That's not weakness. It doesn't feel like strength. Because you're comparing yourself to some impossible standard your family set. But strength isn't never being afraid. It's being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. He leaned forward. These men will test you. They'll say provocative things. Watch how you react. I need you to hold your ground. What if I can't? Then we'll deal with it together. But I think you can. He stood, moving toward the door, then paused. By the way, Maria said you were interested in the studio idea. I've had contractors come by. They can start next week if you approve the plans. Dominic, that's too much. It's a room that's sitting empty. May as well use it for something that makes you happy. He said it casually, as if commissioning a personal art studio for his wife was nothing special. After he left, Serafina sat with the book, but the words blurred. He kept doing this, giving her things, not material possessions, but pieces of herself back. Permission to pursue her interests, space to be herself, belief that she was stronger than she felt. Each gift chipped away at her defenses. The business dinner arrived faster than she wanted. Serafina spent the day preparing, choosing a sophisticated black dress that walked the line between elegant and severe. Maria helped with her hair, pulling it back in a style that made her look older, more formidable. You look like you could run a company yourself, Maria observed. I look terrified. No, you look ready. Maria squeezed her shoulder. Mr. Vale chose you for this. Trust his judgment. The dinner was held at an exclusive restaurant that Dominic apparently owned, the private room filled with men who radiated power and danger. They were older, dressed in expensive suits, speaking Italian peppered with English. Dominic introduced her smoothly, his hand at her back conveying possession and protection in equal measure. Serafina, this is Antonio Moretti, an old family friend. Antonio, my wife. Moretti was in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. He took her hand, studying her face. Vale, you didn't mention your bride was so young, or so beautiful. I mentioned she was intelligent and resilient. Those seem more relevant. Dominic pulled out her chair. Intelligence, yes. Moretti switched to English, probably for her benefit. Tell me, Mrs. Vale,
What do you think of your husband's expansion into the Mediterranean shipping routes? It was a test.
Serafina knew nothing about shipping routes, but she knew enough to recognize when she was being baited. I think my husband is strategic about his expansions. He doesn't make moves without calculating every angle. Diplomatic, Moretti smiled. But do you approve of his methods? Do you approve of your wife's methods, Mr. Moretti? Or do you recognize that she's her own person with her own judgment? She kept her voice pleasant but firm. The table went quiet. Moretti stared at her for a long moment, then burst out laughing. She has fire! Dominic, you undersold her! Beside her, Serafina felt Dominic relax fractionally. She'd passed the first test. The evening continued in that vein, questions designed to provoke or unsettle, conversations that skirted the edges of criminality, discussions of territories and percentages that should have shocked her. But Serafina found herself adapting, deflecting when appropriate, engaging when it served Dominic's interests. At one point, a younger associate named Luca made a crude comment about new brides and wedding nights. Before Dominic could respond, Serafina turned to him with a cold smile. I find men who discuss other people's intimate lives usually have very little going on in their own. Is that your situation, Luca? The table erupted in laughter. Luca flushed red while Moretti clapped his hands together. Magnificent! Dominic, she's wasted on you. Under the table, Dominic's hand found hers, squeezing briefly. Pride, maybe. Or gratitude. The dinner lasted 4 hours. By the time they left, Serafina was exhausted from maintaining her composure, but she'd survived. More than survived. She'd held her own against men who'd probably destroyed people for less than she'd said. In the car, Dominic was quiet until they'd pulled away from the restaurant. Then he turned to her, his expression unreadable. That comment to Luca, where did that come from? I don't know. He was being disrespectful, and I was tired of men thinking they could say whatever they wanted to me without consequences. She met his eyes. Did I overstep? Overstep? Serafina, you were perfect. A slow smile spread across his face. Moretti just texted me. He said, and I quote, "That wife of yours has more balls than half the men at this table. Don't screw it up." He said that? He said that. You impressed them, which is not easy to do. His hand covered hers on the seat between them. You impressed me too. The touch sent warmth through her, different from the casual contact they'd shared before. This felt deliberate, meaningful. I was pretending. Like you said, pretending to be strong. You weren't pretending. You were just being yourself without all the fear your family trained into you. He didn't pull his hand away. This is who you actually are when you're not being crushed under other people's expectations. I like her. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibilities neither of them had acknowledged before. Serafina was acutely aware of his hand on hers, the warmth of his body in the close confines of the car, the way he was looking at her like he was seeing something new. Dominic, I know, this is complicated, but he still didn't move away. We agreed to figure this out slowly, on our own terms. I'm not trying to push or pressure you. I know you're not. That was the problem. If he'd been demanding or forceful, she would have known how to respond. But this careful respect, this genuine interest in her as a person, was dismantling every defense she had. When they reached the penthouse, he walked her to her door as always, but tonight felt different, charged with awareness that hadn't been there before. Thank you, she said softly, for believing I could handle tonight. Thank you for proving me right. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, intimate. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we can talk about the studio plans if you're still interested. She was very aware of how close he was standing, how easy it would be to close the distance between them. Dominic, what are we doing? Building something, he said quietly. I'm not sure what yet, but something real. There it was again, real. The word that kept appearing in their conversations, the thing neither of them knew how to define, but both recognized as important. He stepped back, breaking the moment. Good night, Serafina. Good night. After he left, she leaned against her closed door, her heart racing. Something had shifted tonight. The careful distance they'd been maintaining was eroding, replaced by something neither of them had planned for. The next morning, she found him in his study, a room she'd never entered before. The door was open, and he waved her in when he saw her hovering. About last night, she started. No regrets, I hope. He closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. No, just confusion. We've been living like polite strangers for weeks. Now suddenly there's, she gestured vaguely, I don't know what to call it. Attraction? He said it simply, not embarrassed. Serafina, we're married. We live together. We've been getting to know each other. It's not surprising that feelings are getting complicated. But the contract? Forget the contract. What do you want? He stood, moving around the desk to lean against it. Not what your family wants, not what you think you should want. What do you actually want? It was the same question he'd been asking in different forms since the wedding, and finally, for the first time, Serafina thought she might have an answer. I want to stop being afraid all the time. I want to feel like my life belongs to me, not to other people's plans. She met his eyes. And I want to understand what's happening between us without feeling like I'm betraying some idea of what this marriage was supposed to be. What if this marriage can be whatever we decide it should be? He crossed his arms. We started with a contract neither of us wanted, but we're not those people anymore. You're not the terrified girl who arrived here, and I'm not the man who thought he could keep his entire life transactional. What changed? You changed me, made me want something more than just successful business deals and strategic alliances. His voice was quiet, but certain. Made me realize that having someone who challenges me and surprises me and isn't afraid to call out bullshit is worth more than a perfectly executed merger. Serafina felt her breath catch. You're saying you want this to be real, an actual marriage. I'm saying I want the chance to see what we could build together if we stopped limiting ourselves to what we thought this had to be. He moved closer. But only if you want that too. I'm not going to pressure you or make demands. This has to be your choice. I don't know how to make that choice. I've never been allowed to choose anything important before. Then don't decide right now. Just keep an open mind. Keep getting to know me. Let me keep getting to know you. He reached out, taking her hand gently. We have time. His thumb traced patterns on her palm, such a simple touch, but it sent electricity through her entire body. She realized she was standing in his private study, holding hands with her husband, discussing the possibility of turning their arranged marriage into something genuine. A month ago, this scenario would have been unimaginable. Okay, she said softly, I can do that. His smile was slow and genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that transformed his entire face. Good. Now, about that studio. The contractors need to know if you want north-facing windows for the light. They spent the next hour discussing practical details, window placement, storage for supplies, whether she wanted a separate area for messy projects. It was surreal, planning a personal workspace in his penthouse, but also strangely domestic. This was what normal couples did, made decisions together, built a shared life. The studio took shape over the next 2 weeks. Serafina watched as the spare room transformed into a bright, organized space perfect for art projects. Dominic consulted her on every detail, even coming home early one day to help arrange supplies she'd ordered. You don't have to do this, she said, watching him carefully organize brushes by size. I want to. Besides, I'm curious about what you'll create in here. He stepped back, surveying their work. You've talked about conservation and restoration, but have you ever created your own pieces? Not since school. I was never very good. Or maybe you never had encouragement. He handed her a blank canvas. No pressure, no judgment. Just create something if you want to. That night, after he'd gone to bed, Serafina stood in her new studio with that blank canvas. She picked up a brush, mixed colors, and for the first time in years, just let herself create without worrying about being good enough. The painting that emerged was abstract, dark blues and grays with hints of gold, like night sky breaking into dawn. She didn't realize Dominic was watching until she turned to clean her brushes and found him in the doorway. I couldn't sleep, he said quietly. Saw the light under your door. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep you awake. Serafina, stop apologizing. He moved into the room, studying the canvas. This is beautiful. It's just color experiments. It's more than that. He turned to her, paint smudged and gorgeous in the studio light. You're happy here. I can see it. She realized he was right. For the first time since before her father had called her into his study, she felt something like contentment. Thank you. For this space, for everything. You don't have to thank me for giving you what should have been yours all along. He was closer now, and she could smell his cologne mixed with the turpentine she'd been using. The right to pursue what makes you happy, to make choices. to just exist without constant fear. You make it sound simple. It should be simple. You deserve simple. His hand came up, almost touching her cheek before he stopped himself. Can I ask you something? And you can say no. Her heart started racing. What? Can I kiss you? His voice was rough. Not because of the contract or what anyone expects, just because I want to, and I think maybe you want me to. This was it. The moment where their careful balance shifted into something else. Serafina could say no, could maintain the distance they'd established. But looking at him, at this man who'd shown her more kindness and respect in a month than her family had in her entire life, she realized she didn't want distance anymore. Yes, she whispered. He kissed her gently, giving her every opportunity to pull away. His lips were soft against hers, tentative and questioning. She found herself kissing him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest where she could feel his heartbeat racing as fast as hers. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. We should probably talk about this. Probably. But she didn't want to talk. She wanted to stay in this moment where everything felt possible and right. Serafina, I need you to understand something. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. This doesn't have to lead anywhere tonight. We can take this as slow as you need. I'm not going to I know. She cut him off gently. I know you won't push me. But Dominic, I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting fear make all my decisions. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe it's time to stop living like we're strangers pretending to be married. Her voice was shaky but certain. I'm saying I want to try this. Really try. His smile was brilliant and disbelieving. You're sure? Instead of answering, she kissed him again, and this time there was nothing tentative about it. They didn't make it to either bedroom that night. Instead, they stayed in the studio, talking until dawn painted the windows gold. Dominic pulled 2 chairs together while Serafina made tea, and they sat close enough that their knees touched, sharing stories they'd never told anyone else. My father was a small-time operator, Dominic said, staring into his cup. Gambling, loan sharking, nothing sophisticated. He got killed when I was 16 because he borrowed from the wrong people and couldn't pay back. They made it look like an accident, but everyone knew. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was a bastard who beat my mother and drank away everything we had. His jaw tightened. But watching him die because he was weak, because he didn't understand the rules of the world he was playing in, that taught me something. You either become powerful enough that no one can destroy you, or you get destroyed. There's no middle ground. Is that why you built your empire? To avoid being destroyed? At first. Then it became about more than survival. It became about control, about never being vulnerable again. He looked at her. Until you. You made me realize that having something real means accepting vulnerability. That terrifies me more than any business rival. Serafina reached for his hand. You terrify me too. Not because I think you'll hurt me, but because caring about you means you have the power to. I know. That's why we have to be careful with each other. His fingers intertwined with hers. I'm not good at this, at letting people in. I've spent my entire adult life keeping everyone at arm's length. We'll figure it out together. She said it with more confidence than she felt, but seeing his expression soften made it worth the risk. He pulled her closer, and she ended up curled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat while he told her about building his first legitimate business from laundered money, about the moment he realized he could transform his father's dirty legacy into something that looked clean from the outside. She told him about her childhood in a house that looked perfect, but felt like a museum, about parents who loved her in their own distant way, but had never really seen her. When sunlight finally filled the studio, Dominic checked his watch and swore softly. I have a meeting in 2 hours. You should sleep. So should you. But neither of them moved. Finally, he pressed a kiss to her forehead. This changes things between us. I know. I meant what I said about going slow. Just because we're attracted to each other doesn't mean we rush into anything you're not ready for. She pulled back to look at him. What if I'm tired of being careful? What if I want to see what happens when we stop overthinking everything? His eyes darkened. Serafina, I'm not saying tonight or even soon, but I'm saying I want this to be real. A real marriage with everything that means. Her heart was pounding, but she forced herself to continue. Not because a contract says we should, but because we choose it. You're sure? I'm terrified. But yes, I'm sure. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands tangling in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "You're going to wreck me." "Good. Maybe you needed wrecking." His laugh was surprised and genuine. "Maybe I did." They parted reluctantly, Dominic heading to shower and prepare for his meeting while Serafina cleaned up the studio. But something fundamental had shifted. The careful politeness was gone, replaced by an intimacy that felt both new and inevitable. Over the next few days, they orbited each other differently. Dominic found reasons to come home earlier, to linger over dinner, to sit with her in the evenings while she painted, and he worked on his laptop. Physical contact became natural. His hand on her back when they passed in the hallway, her fingers brushing his when she handed him coffee, stolen kisses in the kitchen that left them both wanting more. Maria noticed, of course. "You two look happy," she observed one morning, a knowing smile on her face. "We're figuring things out," Serafina admitted. "About time. A marriage can't survive on politeness and separate bedrooms forever." Maria handed her fresh flowers for the dining table. "Mr. Vale is different with you, lighter. I've worked for him for 5 years, and I've never seen him smile as much as he does now." The observation stayed with Serafina throughout the day. Was she changing him the way he was changing her? The thought was both powerful and frightening. That evening, Dominic came home to find her in the living room, staring at her phone with an expression he couldn't read. "What's wrong?" "My uncle called. He wants to have dinner tomorrow night. Just family. He says they want to check on how I'm settling in." She looked up. "But it feels like more than that." Dominic's expression hardened. "They want to assess whether you're fulfilling the contract terms. Make sure their investment is paying off." "Probably." The thought made her stomach turn. "I don't want to go." "Then don't." He sat beside her. "You're my wife, not their property. You don't owe them updates on our marriage." "But they'll think something's wrong. They'll pressure my parents and my father." She stopped, remembering her father's nervous energy, the way he'd looked when discussing the contract. "My father is afraid of Uncle Vincent. If I refuse, Vincent will make problems." "Let him. He doesn't control me, and he sure as hell doesn't control you anymore." Dominic's voice was steel. "But if you want to go, I'll come with you. We'll present a united front. They asked for just me. Too bad. Where you go, I go, especially when it involves people who traumatized you into this marriage." He took her hand. "We do this together, or we don't do it at all." The next evening, they arrived at Vincent's estate in Westchester, a sprawling property that screamed old money and older secrets. Gabriella greeted them at the door, her smile tight when she saw Dominic. "We asked for Serafina alone." "And I declined that request," Dominic said pleasantly, his arm around Serafina's waist. "I'm sure you understand. Newly married couples prefer to do things together." In the dining room, Vincent waited with Serafina's parents and Marcus, the cousin who'd made trouble at the gala. The atmosphere was tense, controlled. "Dominic, unexpected." Vincent's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We wanted to have a family conversation with our niece. She's my family now, and as her husband, I have a vested interest in any conversation that involves her." Dominic pulled out Serafina's chair, a gesture of protection and possession. Dinner was excruciating. Small talk about business, pointed questions about their life together, thinly veiled assessments of whether Serafina was performing adequately. She felt like an exhibit being judged, every answer scrutinized for weakness. "You look well," her mother ventured. "Happy, even." "I am happy," Serafina said, and meant it. "Good, good." Her father fidgeted with his wine glass. "The arrangement is working out then. Everyone satisfied with the terms." "The arrangement," Dominic's voice went cold. "Is that what we're calling a marriage now?" "A marriage that was arranged," Vincent clarified smoothly, "which requires both parties to fulfill their obligations." "And what obligations are those, exactly?" Dominic leaned back, deceptively casual. "I'm curious what you think my wife owes you." The temperature in the room dropped. Vincent's eyes narrowed. "We had an agreement. Stability, alliance, certain expectations about heirs and discretion. Expectations you outlined without consulting the person most affected." Dominic's tone was conversational, but deadly. "Tell me, Vincent, did you ask Serafina what she wanted? Or did you just assume she'd comply because you've spent her entire life teaching her that her feelings don't matter?" "Dominic," Serafina touched his arm, wanting to diffuse the situation. No, they need to hear this. He turned to Vincent, and Serafina saw the ruthless businessman everyone feared. You manipulated a young woman into a marriage by terrorizing her with stories about me. You excluded her from decisions about her own life. You treated her like property to be traded for your family's benefit. And now you want to check if she's performing adequately. Vincent's face reddened. We did what was necessary to secure her future. You did what was convenient for you, Dominic stood, his hand finding Serafina's. Here's how this is going to work going forward. Serafina is my wife and my partner. What happens in our marriage is between us. If you want to maintain a relationship with her, you treat her with respect. You ask instead of demand. You acknowledge she's an autonomous person with her own thoughts and feelings. Can you do that? The silence was absolute. Serafina held her breath, waiting for the explosion. But Vincent, for all his bluster, recognized real power when he saw it. Dominic Vale angry was more dangerous than Vincent could afford to provoke. Of course, Vincent said finally, the words clearly costing him. We only want what's best for Serafina. Then prove it by backing off. Dominic helped Serafina from her chair. We're leaving. If you want to have dinner with us in the future, you can issue a proper invitation and accept that I come too. They walked out without waiting for a response. In the car, Serafina was shaking, not from fear, but from a strange kind of exhilaration. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Dominic's jaw was tight. Watching them treat you like that, seeing your father look at you like you're a problem to be managed, I couldn't sit there and pretend it was acceptable. They're going to be angry. Let them be angry. They needed to understand that the dynamic has changed. You're not theirs to control anymore. Serafina felt something break open in her chest, a release she hadn't known she needed. Thank you for standing up for me. No one's ever done that before. His expression softened. Get used to it. I'm not letting anyone treat you like that again. The drive back to Manhattan was quiet, both processing what had happened. When they reached the penthouse, Serafina poured them both whiskey, her hand steadier than she expected. My mother called while you were parking the car, she said, handing him a glass. She apologized, said she was proud of me for finding someone who actually defends me. She should be apologizing for a lot more than that. I know, but it's a start. Serafina sipped her drink, feeling the burn. Marcus looked like he wanted to kill you. Marcus is a coward who hides behind his family name. He's not a threat. Dominic loosened his tie. But Vincent is going to cause problems. Men like him don't like being challenged, especially in front of others. Will he come after you? After us? He'll try to make moves in business, maybe spread rumors, apply pressure through mutual contacts. He moved to the window, staring out at the city. But he won't win. I have more power, more connections, and more resources. And unlike him, I'm willing to burn bridges to protect what matters. Is that what I am? What matters? He turned, his expression intense. You're everything that matters. These past weeks with you, getting to know you, watching you come alive again, building something real. It's made me realize how empty my life was before. I'm not losing that. I'm not losing you. The declaration hung in the air, raw and honest. Serafina set down her glass and crossed to him, her heart pounding. Then don't. She reached up, touching his face. Don't lose me. Don't push me away. Just keep being exactly who you are right now. He kissed her desperately, like he'd been holding back for too long. She kissed him back with equal intensity, all the careful restraint they'd maintained burning away. His hands slid into her hair, down her back, pulling her closer. She felt alive in a way she'd never experienced, every nerve ending on fire. Serafina. Her name was a growl against her lips. If we don't stop now, I don't want to stop. She met his eyes, letting him see her certainty. I want this. I want you. Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, I'm sure. She took his hand, leading him toward his bedroom. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of letting fear decide everything. I choose this. I choose you. Inside his room, he was gentle and patient, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. But Serafina didn't want gentle patience. She wanted the passion she'd seen in his eyes, the intensity that made her feel real and wanted and alive. When they finally came together, it was nothing like what her aunt had described. Nothing clinical or dutiful or frightening. It was overwhelming and beautiful. Two people discovering each other without the weight of obligation crushing them. Afterward, Wrapped in his arms with dawn breaking outside, Serafina felt something she'd never expected to feel in this marriage. Completely safe. No regrets? Dominic's voice was rough, his hand tracing patterns on her shoulder. None.
You? Only that I wasted weeks being too careful when I could have had this. He pressed a kiss to her hair.
You've completely destroyed my carefully controlled life. Good. It needed destroying. She tilted her head to look at him. What happens now? Now we stop pretending this is anything other than what it is. A real marriage between two people who actually care about each other. His smile was soft. And we deal with whatever fallout comes from last night's dinner. The fallout came faster than expected. 2 days later, Dominic received word that Vincent was calling in favors, trying to freeze him out of certain business deals. Marcus was spreading rumors about the marriage being unstable, hinting that Dominic was having affairs and treating Serafina poorly. They're trying to damage your reputation, Serafina said, reading the reports Dominic's security chief had compiled. They're trying to isolate me, make me look weak. He studied the papers, his expression calculating. But they're making a mistake. They're assuming I'll back down to protect business interests. Won't you? Not this time. He looked up at her. I've built everything on the principle that emotion is weakness, that personal connections make you vulnerable. But you've taught me that's wrong. Having someone worth protecting doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous. What are you going to do? I'm going to show them exactly how dangerous I can be when they threaten what's mine. His smile was cold. Starting with exposing every dirty secret Vincent has been hiding. The man's built his reputation on being respectable, but I know things that would destroy that image. Dominic, if you go to war with my family, they fired the first shot when they manipulated you into this marriage. They escalated when they tried to damage us. He stood, pulling her close. I'm not starting this fight, but I'm sure as hell finishing it. Over the next week, Serafina watched her husband dismantle her uncle's carefully constructed empire. Documents appeared in the press about Vincent's illegal activities. Business partners suddenly withdrew support. Politicians he'd bought turned their backs when their own corruption was threatened with exposure. How did you get all this information? She asked one evening, watching news coverage of another scandal breaking. I've been collecting it for years. Insurance, in case he ever became a problem. Dominic handed her wine. Men like Vincent always underestimate preparation. They think power is about showing strength. Real power is about knowing exactly where to apply pressure to make someone crumble. You're terrifying when you're like this. Does it bother you? She considered the question honestly. A month ago, seeing this side of him, cold, calculating, ruthless, would have confirmed every fear her family had planted. But now, knowing the man behind the tactics, understanding that this violence was strategic and directed at people who'd hurt her, she felt something different. No, she said finally. It bothers me that I don't mind, that I'm actually glad you're destroying them. That's not wrong. They hurt you. They're still trying to hurt you. Being glad someone's defending you is human. Marcus was the first to break, showing up at the penthouse unannounced 3 days into Dominic's campaign. Thomas tried to turn him away, but Serafina heard the commotion and intervened. Let him up, she told Thomas, but stay close. Marcus looked terrible, unshaven, disheveled, his usual arrogance replaced by desperation. I need to talk to Dominic. He's busy. You can talk to me. Serafina, please, tell him to stop. The things he's releasing, the people he's turning against us. My father is going to kill me. Good. Maybe he should. Her voice was ice. You made crude comments about my wedding night. You called my husband a killer in front of hundreds of people. You spread rumors about our marriage. Why would I help you? Because I'm family. Family doesn't terrorize each other into marriages. Family doesn't treat people like property. She stood taller. You're not my family. Not anymore. Dominic appeared behind her, his presence immediately dominating the space. You have 30 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't have you thrown out. Please. I'll do anything. Just stop releasing information about my business deals. I'll lose everything. You should have thought about that before you decided to make an enemy of me. Dominic's voice was flat. Tell Vincent he can end this anytime. All he has to do is issue a public apology to my wife and withdraw completely from her life. No more calls, no more pressure, no more treating her like his property. He'll never do that. Then you'll all suffer the consequences. Dominic moved closer,
and Marcus actually flinched. You people seem to think I care more about business than I do about protecting what's mine. You're wrong. I will burn every bridge, destroy every alliance, and spend every dollar I have to make sure no one ever treats Serafina the way you have. Are we clear? Marcus fled, leaving Serafina and Dominic alone in the entrance hall. Did you mean that? She asked quietly. About burning bridges for me? Every word. He pulled her close. You're more important than any business deal. More important than maintaining peace with families who don't deserve it. More important than anything else in my life. She kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. Gratitude, desire, the beginning of something that felt dangerously close to love. The war ended a week later when Vincent appeared at the penthouse, looking decades older than he had at that disastrous dinner. Dominic made him wait in the entrance hall while he and Serafina discussed whether to see him. It's your choice, Dominic said. I can send him away, or we can hear what he has to say. I want to see him. I want to hear him apologize. They received Vincent in the living room, Serafina seated beside Dominic on the sofa, united. Vincent stood before them like a supplicant, his usual commanding presence diminished. I came to apologize, he said, the words clearly painful. To both of you. I was wrong about how I handled the marriage arrangement. I was wrong to exclude Serafina from decisions about her life. I was wrong to spread rumors and try to damage your reputation. Keep going, Dominic said coldly. I want to withdraw from Serafina's life. No more calls, no more expectations, no more interference. He looked at his niece, and for a moment something like genuine regret crossed his face. I thought I was protecting you, ensuring your security. But Dominic was right. I treated you like property instead of a person. I'm sorry. Serafina studied the man who'd controlled so much of her life. The fear she'd always felt around him was gone, replaced by something like pity. He'd built his identity on power and control, and now both were slipping away. I accept your apology, she said quietly, but that doesn't mean I forgive you. What you did to me, the fear you created, the way you manipulated me, that's not something an apology can fix. I understand. Good. Then understand this too. I'm done being the person you wanted me to be. I'm done letting you or anyone else in our family dictate my choices. If you want any kind of relationship with me going forward, it's on my terms, not yours. Vincent nodded, defeated. Your terms. After he left, Serafina felt something release inside her, a tension she'd carried for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Dominic wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. How do you feel? Free, she whispered. For the first time in my life, I actually feel free. Good. That's how you should feel. He turned her to face him. You know what this means, though. The contract, the arrangement, all of it. None of it matters anymore. We're not bound by obligation or family pressure, so I need to ask you something. Her heart started racing. What? Do you want to stay married to me? His eyes were vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Not because of the contract or because we've already come this far, but because you actually want to build a life with me? The question hung between them, enormous and terrifying and necessary. Serafina thought about everything that had brought them here. The fear, the gradual trust, the moment she'd stopped seeing him as her captor and started seeing him as her partner. She thought about the studio he'd built for her, the way he defended her, the gentleness he showed despite his reputation for ruthlessness. Yes, she said, her voice steady and sure. I want to stay married to you. I want to build a life with you, not because I have to, but because I choose to. His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Thank God. Because I don't know what I would have done if you'd said no. Probably destroyed my entire family out of spite. Probably, he agreed, pulling her closer. But I prefer this outcome. They stood there in their living room, holding each other, knowing that everything that came before had just been prologue. The real marriage was beginning now, not built on contracts or obligations, but on choice and trust and the slow, terrifying process of falling in love. The weeks following Vincent's surrender brought a lightness to the penthouse that neither of them had anticipated. Serafina woke each morning wrapped in Dominic's arms, still marveling at how natural it felt to share his bed, his life, his space. The separate bedrooms sat empty now, converted into other purposes. Her original room became additional studio space, while his became a library where they spent evenings reading together. I enrolled in that conservation course at NYU,
she told him one morning over breakfast, nervous despite his obvious support. It starts next month, 2 evenings a week plus weekend workshops. Dominic looked up from his newspaper, a slow smile spreading across his face. That's incredible. What changed your mind? You did. You keep telling me I can have what I want, so I decided to actually believe you. She poured more coffee, still getting used to the idea that her dreams weren't selfish indulgences, but legitimate pursuits. The instructor is apparently one of the best in the country. She's worked on pieces at the Louvre and the Uffizi. Then you'll learn from the best. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I'm proud of you. The simple words hit harder than they should have. No one in her family had ever said they were proud of her, not for accomplishments or choices or simply existing. She blinked back unexpected tears. Thank you. For everything. For making me believe I could do this. You were always capable. You just needed someone to stop telling you that you weren't. He stood, pressing a kiss to her forehead before grabbing his briefcase. I have meetings until 6, but I should be home for dinner. Maria said something about making that pasta you like. The carbonara? That's the one. He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression that made her heart skip. I love you, in case I haven't said it clearly enough. The declaration was casual, said like he was commenting on the weather, but the weight of it settled around her like a warm blanket. They'd been dancing around the words for weeks, showing it in actions but never quite speaking it aloud. I love you too, she said, and watched his entire face transform with joy. After he left, Serafina sat with those 3 words, testing them in her mind. She loved Dominic Vale, the ruthless businessman who built empires, the gentle man who held her through nightmares, the partner who defended her against her own family. It should have been impossible to love someone she'd been forced to marry, but somehow the force of it had burned away, leaving only choice. Her phone rang, shattering the moment. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. Mama? Serafina, darling, I hope I'm not calling too early. Her mother sounded tentative, the way she had since Vincent's apology. I wanted to ask if you'd have lunch with me today, just the 2 of us. I know I don't deserve it after everything, but I'd like to try. Serafina thought about refusing, about maintaining the boundaries she'd established. But she heard genuine regret in her mother's voice, and some part of her still longed for a real relationship with the woman who'd raised her. Okay, 1 o'clock at that place near the park you like. The restaurant was elegant and quiet, exactly the kind of place her mother preferred. She was already seated when Serafina arrived, looking older somehow, the strain of recent months showing in new lines around her eyes. You look beautiful, her mother said, standing to embrace her. Different. Happy. I am happy. Serafina settled into her chair, studying the woman across from her. That surprises you? Honestly? Yes. When we arranged the marriage, I convinced myself it would work out well because Dominic was successful and powerful. But I never imagined you'd actually fall in love with him. She twisted her napkin. I never let myself hope for that. Why not? Because hoping for love felt like asking for too much. My own marriage was arranged, and while your father and I are fond of each other, it's not love. It's companionship and shared history and mutual tolerance. Her mother's smile was sad. I thought that was the best you could hope for, too. It wasn't the best I could hope for. It was just what you settled for. The words came out harsher than intended, but Serafina didn't take them back. Her mother flinched but nodded. You're right. And I'm sorry for projecting my own limitations onto you. Watching you with Dominic these past weeks, the way he looks at you, the way you've come alive, it's made me realize what I denied you, what I denied myself. They ordered lunch, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years. Her mother asked about the conservation course, about her painting, about the studio Dominic had built. She listened without judgment or correction, seeming genuinely interested in Serafina's life rather than just monitoring her performance. Your father wants to apologize too, her mother said over dessert. He's ashamed of how he handled everything. Vincent pressured him terribly, threatened to expose some financial mistakes if he didn't cooperate. That's not an excuse, but it's context. I know Uncle Vincent manipulated everyone, but Papa still made choices. He still signed that contract without asking what I wanted. You're right, and he knows it. She reached across the table, taking Serafina's hand. We failed you as parents. We were so focused on securing your future that we forgot to consider if it was a future you actually wanted. Can you forgive us? Serafina thought about forgiveness, about what it meant to move forward. She wasn't sure she could forget the fear and manipulation, but maybe she could learn to coexist with it. I can try, she said finally. But things have to be different going forward. You can't treat me like a child or like I need managing. I'm an adult making my own choices now. I understand, and I'll do better. We both will. Her mother squeezed her hand. I want to know my daughter, the real you, not the version we shaped you into. After lunch, Serafina walked through Central Park, processing the conversation. Her mother's apology felt genuine, a starting point for something healthier. It wouldn't erase the damage, but maybe they could build something new from the ruins. She was still walking when Dominic called. Where are you? Maria said you went out for lunch. Central Park. I had lunch with my mother. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. How do you feel about that? She considered the question, recognizing that he was asking not what she should feel, but what she actually felt. Hopeful, I think, and sad for what we missed out on because everyone was too busy playing their roles to be honest with each other. Do you want company? I can leave the office early. You don't have to do that. I know, but I want to. Send me your location. 20 minutes later, he appeared in his suit, drawing looks from other park visitors as he strode toward her. Even in the middle of Central Park, Dominic Vale commanded attention, power and danger wrapped in expensive tailoring. Is that naive? It's hopeful. There's a difference. He guided her to a bench overlooking the lake. But you don't have to decide everything today. You can take your time figuring out what kind of relationship works for you. When did you become so wise about family dynamics? When I fell in love with someone who made me realize that not all family is toxic, that some relationships are worth saving if both people are willing to do the work. He traced patterns on her palm. Your mother sounds like she's willing. Whether your father is too, time will tell. They sat in comfortable silence, watching boats drift across the lake. Serafina found herself thinking about the future. Not the frightening unknown she'd faced on her wedding day, but a future full of possibilities she actually wanted. I've been thinking, she said slowly, about what comes next. For us. What do you mean? The contract mentioned heirs, children. She felt him tense slightly. I know that was part of the arrangement, but I want to know what you actually want, not what the contract said. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. I want children eventually. I want a family with you, but only when you're ready, when it's something we both choose, not because a piece of paper says we should. What if I said I think I might be ready? Not now, not tomorrow, but soon. What if I said the idea of having a family with you doesn't terrify me the way it used to? He turned to face her fully, his expression a mixture of joy and disbelief. You're serious? I'm serious. A few months ago, the thought of bringing children into this situation was horrifying, but now, thinking about raising kids with you, teaching them to be strong and kind and honest, it feels possible. Good even. Serafina. He pulled her into his lap, not caring who saw. You've given me so much already. A real marriage, actual happiness, a reason to care about more than just business. If you give me children too, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. She kissed him, deep and thorough, until an elderly woman walking her dog cleared her throat pointedly, and they broke apart, laughing. We should probably go home, Dominic said, his voice rough with desire, before I scandalize all of Central Park. I like scandalizing you. I've noticed. He stood, pulling her up with him. Come on, wife. Let's go home. The word settled differently now. Home wasn't just a penthouse or a location. It was wherever they were together, building something real from the ashes of what was supposed to be a business transaction. That evening, over Maria's perfect carbonara, they talked about the future in concrete terms. Where they might raise children, the penthouse, or somewhere with a yard. Whether Serafina would continue her conservation work, absolutely, Dominic insisted. They'd hire help so she could pursue her career. How to handle their families going forward, carefully, with clear boundaries. I want to make something clear, Dominic said, refilling their wine glasses. Everything I have, everything I've built, it's ours now. Not mine, ours. I'm having my lawyers draw up papers that ensure you're a full partner in all of it. Dominic, you don't have to. I want to. If something happens to me, I need to know you're protected, that you have resources and power of your own. His expression was serious. I built an empire, but you're the one who made it worth having. I want you to share it completely. The gesture was massive, Billionaire businessmen didn't typically hand over equal control to their spouses. But Dominic was offering exactly that, a tangible demonstration of trust and partnership. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting me with this, with everything. You trusted me with your life when you had every reason not to. This is the least I can do." Later, wrapped in sheets that smelled like him, Serafina reflected on how completely her life had transformed. She'd entered this marriage expecting a prison and found freedom instead. Expected cruelty and found gentleness. Expected to be property and found herself becoming a partner in every sense of the word. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic's voice was sleepy, his arms tightening around her. "How wrong I was about everything. About you. About this marriage. About what my life would be." "Good wrong or bad wrong?" "The best kind of wrong." She tilted her head to kiss his jaw. "I thought I was being sentenced to a lifetime of fear. Instead, I found someone who makes me braver than I ever thought I could be." "You were always brave. You just needed permission to recognize it." The months that followed were a masterclass in building a life together. Serafina threw herself into her conservation studies, discovering a passion and talent she'd never been allowed to explore. Her instructor, a fierce woman named Dr. Chen, took her under her wing, offering opportunities to work on increasingly important pieces. "You have real skill," Dr. Chen told her after Serafina successfully restored a damaged Renaissance panel. "Have you considered making this a career rather than just a hobby?" The question would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. Now it felt natural to say yes, to envision a future where she contributed to the art world in meaningful ways. Dominic supported every step, attending her first gallery exhibition where her own paintings were displayed alongside her restoration work. He stood beside her in his suit, radiating pride as critics and collectors praised her technique and vision. "You know what's remarkable?" said one elderly art dealer who'd known Dominic for years. "I've seen this man negotiate billion-dollar deals without blinking, but watching him look at you, looking at your own work, that's the first time I've seen him genuinely happy." The observation stayed with Serafina throughout the evening. She'd changed Dominic as much as he'd changed her, softening his sharp edges while he'd helped her discover her own strength. Her relationship with her parents evolved slowly. Her mother called weekly, asking about her work and life without the underlying judgment that had always colored their conversations. Her father was more hesitant, still ashamed of his role in the arrangement, but he was trying. They had dinner once a month, awkward at first but gradually becoming more comfortable. Vincent, true to his word, stayed away. She heard through family gossip that he'd sold off several businesses and retired to Florida. His power base in New York completely dismantled by Dominic's strategic assault. She felt no sympathy. He'd earned his downfall through decades of manipulation and cruelty. Marcus sent a single apology text 6 months after everything exploded, which Serafina deleted without responding. Some people didn't deserve forgiveness, just distance. The real surprise came from Carlo, Dominic's best man and closest friend. He appeared at the penthouse one evening with his own news. "I'm getting married," he announced, looking shell-shocked. "Met her at a charity gala, and she doesn't take any of my bullshit. Her name is Isabella, and I think she might actually make me want to be a better person." Dominic laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Welcome to the club. Fair warning, it's terrifying and amazing in equal measure." "I can see that." Carlo studied them both. "You two are disgustingly happy. It's completely ruined my cynicism about relationships." "Good," Serafina said, pouring him wine. "You deserved some ruining." Meeting Isabella was a revelation. She was sharp and funny, completely unimpressed by Carlo's money or position, exactly the kind of partner he needed. The four of them became close friends, having dinners together where the conversation ranged from art to business to the absurdity of their lives. "So let me get this straight," Isabella said one evening, slightly drunk on expensive wine. "You two had an arranged marriage that was supposed to be completely transactional, but instead you fell in love and destroyed your entire family structure in the process?" "That's the summary, yes," Serafina confirmed. "That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard. Like a fairy tale, but with more corporate espionage and family drama." "Welcome to our world," Dominic said dryly, "where romance and ruthless business tactics coexist." A year into their marriage, Serafina took a pregnancy test on a quiet Sunday morning while Dominic was still sleeping. When the positive result appeared, she sat on the bathroom floor, processing the rush of emotions: joy, fear, excitement, terror. She found Dominic in the kitchen making coffee, his hair still messy from sleep, wearing only pajama pants.
He looked domestic and beautiful and hers. "I have something to tell you," she said, holding the test behind her back. He turned, immediately alert to her tone. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually. Terrifyingly right." She brought her hand forward, showing him the test. For a moment, he just stared at it, processing. Then his face broke into the most brilliant smile she'd ever seen. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby." She was crying and laughing simultaneously. "Are you happy? I know we talked about it, but actually being pregnant, I'm ecstatic, terrified, but ecstatic." He set her down gently, his hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. "There's a person in there. A person we made. A person who's going to completely destroy our carefully organized life." Good. It needed more destroying anyway. They spent the day planning and dreaming, talking about names and nurseries and how they'd balance work with parenting. Dominic was adamant that they'd hire help, but still be hands-on parents, that their child would grow up knowing they were wanted and loved. "I want our kid to have everything we didn't," he said that evening, his hand resting on her stomach. Choices. Unconditional love. The freedom to be whoever they want to be. They will. We'll make sure of it. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Serafina continued her conservation work until her 8th month, when Dr. Chen insisted she take maternity leave. Dominic became hilariously overprotective, trying to ban her from lifting anything heavier than a coffee cup. "I'm pregnant, not fragile," she reminded him for the 100th time. "I know, but you're carrying the most important person in my life, so forgive me for being cautious." "The most important person?" "Well, second most important. You're first, obviously, but the baby's a very close second." Their daughter was born on a snowy February evening, arriving 3 weeks early and making her presence known with powerful lungs. Dominic held Serafina's hand through labor, looking more terrified than she'd ever seen him face down business rivals. "You're doing amazing," he kept saying, even when she was cursing him for getting her pregnant in the first place. When the doctor finally placed their daughter in Serafina's arms, everything else fell away. She was perfect, tiny and wrinkled and absolutely beautiful. Dark hair like Dominic's. Serafina's nose, her own determined expression. "What should we name her?" Dominic asked, his voice choked with emotion. They'd discussed names for months but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at her daughter's face, Serafina knew exactly what she should be called. "Elena. It means light." She looked up at her husband, this man who'd started as a stranger and become her everything. Because she came from something that started in darkness and became light. "Elena Vale." He tested the name, then nodded. "It's perfect. She's perfect." The first few months were exhausting and wonderful. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, the terrifying responsibility of keeping a tiny human alive. But they did it together, taking shifts and supporting each other through the chaos. Serafina's parents visited often, her mother especially enamored with her granddaughter. "She looks just like you did as a baby," she said, holding Elena with gentle expertise. "I'm so sorry I wasn't a better mother to you. I promised to be a better grandmother to her." "You're doing fine, Mama. We're all learning as we go." Even Maria got involved, becoming an unofficial grandmother who spoiled Elena shamelessly and gave Serafina breaks when she needed them. "Mr. Vale is completely transformed," Maria observed one afternoon while Serafina napped and Dominic walked the floor with a fussy Elena. "I've worked for him for 7 years and I've never seen him like this. Soft, happy, human. He was always human. He just needed someone to be human with." 6 months after Elena's birth, Serafina returned to her conservation work part-time. Dr. Chen had held a position for her, understanding that motherhood didn't mean abandoning her career. Dominic adjusted his schedule to ensure they shared parenting duties equally, shocking his business associates by leaving meetings early for bath time. "You've gone soft," one of his rivals commented during a negotiation. "I've gone happy," Dominic corrected. "There's a difference. And happy men with something to protect are far more dangerous than unhappy men with nothing to lose." The warning was subtle, but effective. No one questioned his commitment to his family again. On their second wedding anniversary, Dominic surprised Serafina with a trip to Italy, just the two of them, while Maria and Serafina's mother tag-teamed watching Elena. They spent a week in Tuscany, visiting museums and vineyards,
making love in their hotel room like the newlyweds they'd never really been the first time around. "I want to show you something," Dominic said one evening, leading her to a small chapel on a hillside overlooking endless vineyards. Inside, the space was intimate and beautiful, lit by candles and empty except for a priest who smiled knowingly. "What is this?" Serafina asked. "A renewal of vows, or really, vows for the first time that actually mean something." He took her hands. "We got married the first time because we had to. I want to marry you again because I choose to, because I can't imagine my life without you in it." Tears streamed down her face as the priest led them through new vows, vows they wrote themselves, promising love and partnership and choice. When Dominic slipped a new ring on her finger alongside the original, she felt something complete inside her. "I love you," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I choose you, today, tomorrow, always." "I love you," he replied. "You saved me from a life I didn't even know was empty. You gave me purpose and joy and a family. I'm yours, completely." They left the chapel as the sun set, painting the Tuscan landscape in gold and amber. Walking hand in hand down the hill, Serafina reflected on the impossible journey that had brought them here. She'd been forced into a marriage with a stranger and found her soulmate, had been told she was powerless and discovered her strength, had expected a lifetime of fear and found love instead. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked, pulling her close. "That I wouldn't change anything. Even the painful parts, even the fear, because all of it led us here. To a random hillside in Italy? To each other. To Elena. To a life that's actually ours instead of something someone else planned for us." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "We get to keep choosing this. Every day we get to wake up and choose each other again. That's not what the contract gave us. That's what we built ourselves." He kissed her as the sun dipped below the horizon, and Serafina felt the absolute rightness of it all. They'd taken something that was meant to be a transaction and transformed it into something transcendent. Had turned force into choice, fear into love, obligation into partnership. Years later, when Elena was old enough to ask how they met, Serafina and Dominic would tell her an edited version of the truth. They'd explain that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, that love can grow even in difficult circumstances, that choosing each other every day is what makes a real marriage. They'd tell her about the importance of making her own choices, of being strong enough to change situations that seem unchangeable, of finding partners who respect and challenge and adore her in equal measure. But mostly, they'd tell her that she was the greatest gift to come from their imperfect beginning, that sometimes mercy changes everything, that power without compassion is empty, but compassion without power is helpless, and that the night Dominic Vale chose to step back from a terrified bride, instead of taking what he was legally entitled to, was the night that changed both their lives forever. That single moment of conscience, of choosing humanity over entitlement, had set everything else in motion. The contract that had bound them together was long since destroyed, burned in their fireplace one symbolic evening. They didn't need paper to hold them together anymore. They had something far stronger: choice, trust, and a love that had grown from the most unlikely soil imaginable. Standing in their Tuscan chapel, rings exchanged and vows renewed, they weren't the people who'd been forced together in a cathedral full of strangers. They were partners who'd fought their way to this moment, who'd chosen each other again and again despite every reason not to. And that, Serafina thought as she kissed her husband under the Italian stars, was the real happy ending. Not that everything had been easy, but that they'd made something beautiful from something broken. Not that the marriage was perfect, but that it was real. The contract had brought them together. But love, messy, complicated, chosen love, had made them stay.